The moon was wrong. Margot knew it the moment she stepped into the garden. Too bright, too close, pulling at something beneath her ribs she had no name for. And then the ground vanished and the world went white. When awareness returned, it came in fragments. The rhythmic clatter of wheels on stone, the smell of leather and tobacco, and something else. Wild, sharp, dangerous. Her head throbbed. Her skin felt too tight. The corset stays beneath her evening gown seemed to constrict with each shallow breath. She opened her eyes. A man sat across from her in the dim carriage, perfectly still except for the slight rise and fall of his chest. Dark hair, severe features, eyes that caught the lamplight like a wolf's. He wore a black tailcoat that fit him like it had been made for violence, every line sharp, controlled. And not a gentleman playing at power, something far more dangerous. He was watching her with the kind of focus that made her pulse stutter. "You're awake." His voice was low, controlled. Not a question. Margot pushed herself upright, her gloved hands shaking against the velvet seat. The silk of her skirts rustled loud in the enclosed space. "Who are you? Where?" "Baron Thaddeus Carrington." He leaned forward slightly, and the air in the carriage seemed to compress. "And you collapsed in your family's garden approximately 40 minutes ago. I brought you here." She tried to make sense of that, tried to remember the charity ledgers, the letter from the coal supplier, walking into the garden for air because the drawing room had felt suffocating, all those bodies pressed into silk and wool, the smell of candle wax and perfume making her dizzy, and the moon rising over the hedge maze, impossibly bright, and then nothing. "I don't understand," she said carefully. "Why would you? Because leaving you there would have killed you." His gaze dropped to her hands, still trembling in her lap despite the kidskin gloves. "The moon triggered something. You felt it, didn't you, before you fell?" The pulling sensation, the heat beneath her skin, like her body was trying to crawl out of itself. The way the moonlight had seemed to reach inside her chest and twist. She swallowed hard. "I felt ill, that's all." "Don't lie to me, Miss Sinclair." The use of her name jolted her. "How do you know who I am?" "I know a great deal about you." He shifted, and she caught a glimpse of something in his expression, not cruelty, but ruthlessness. The look of a man used to getting answers. "Your family's estate borders my territory. You run the benevolence ledger. You fund a women's infirmary that's about to close because your coal supplier is bleeding you dry, and your mother won't let you renegotiate without a male family member present." Margot's breath caught. Those were private details. Humiliating details. "You've been spying on me." "I've been protecting my borders." His tone didn't soften. 3 nights ago, I stopped sleeping. My wolf became restless, pacing, agitated, demanding I ride out to the border. I thought it was a rogue incursion. 2 nights ago, the pull became worse. Last night, I couldn't stay in my own house. He paused, his jaw tight. "Tonight, I felt you fall. The exact moment, like something inside me stopped breathing." Her hands stilled in her lap. That's impossible." "So is everything else you're about to learn." He leaned back, his expression unreadable in the shifting lamplight. "When I found you in that garden, unconscious, your skin burning, your pulse erratic, I had a choice. Leave you there and let whatever was happening run its course, or bring you somewhere you could be helped. You abducted me. I saved your life." The carriage jolted over uneven ground, and Margot had to brace herself against the seat. She should be terrified. She should be demanding he take her home immediately. Propriety and scandal be damned. But beneath the fear, beneath the confusion, something else stirred. A pull she couldn't name. And stranger still, the violent shaking in her hands had stopped the moment she'd woken in his presence. The fever that had been building all evening, making her skin prickle and her vision swim, had eased. Her body had calmed before her mind had even caught up. He was still watching her, and she realized with a start that he hadn't blinked once since she'd woken. "What did you mean?" she asked slowly. "When you said the moon triggered something?" For the first time, his expression shifted. Not quite a smile, something darker. "You really don't know." "Know what?" He leaned back, his gaze never leaving hers. "What you are." Margot's chest tightened. The boning in her corset dug into her ribs as she straightened. I'm a perfectly ordinary woman who was unwell and is now being held against her will by a stranger. That's what I am. Ordinary. He repeated the word like it was a curiosity. Is that what you tell yourself when you wake at dawn, with your heart racing for no reason? When you hear conversations 3 rooms away? When you know someone is lying before they finish their sentence? She went very still. Because he was right. All of it. She'd always been good at reading people. Always had sharp hearing, sharp instincts. Her mother called it Margot's gift for management. Her father had called it uncanny. That doesn't mean anything, she said, but her voice wavered. It means everything. He leaned forward again, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Close enough to notice the white cravat at his throat was tied with military precision. You're awakening, Miss Sinclair, and that makes you extraordinarily dangerous to yourself and everyone around you, unless you're properly contained. The word contained sent ice down her spine. That I won't be contained by anyone. Then you'll be dead within a fortnight. His voice was flat, matter of fact. The first full transformation will tear you apart if you're unprepared. The council will lock you away if they find you first. And they will find you because you're leaving a trail any tracker could follow. Margot forced herself to breathe, to think. This man, this Baron, was either dangerously insane or telling her something impossible. She chose her words carefully. What council? The Pack Council, the body that governs people like us. People like us, she echoed. And what exactly are people like us? He smiled then, and it was not a kind expression. Wolves, Miss Sinclair. The carriage lurched to a stop. Before Margot could respond, the door opened, and a man in dark livery appeared, our brass buttons gleaming even in the dim light. He glanced at her, then at the Baron, his expression carefully neutral. My lord, Dr. Merriweather is waiting in the East Wing. Good. Thaddeus rose smoothly, his frame filling the doorway. The ceiling of the carriage forced him to duck slightly, making him seem even larger. He looked back at her. You have 2 choices. Come inside willingly, let the doctor examine you and hear what I have to say, or I'll carry you. Margot stared at him. That's not a choice. No, he agreed. But I'm giving you the dignity of pretending it is. She wanted to argue, wanted to demand he take her home, call for her mother, send for the magistrate, but the pulling sensation was back, stronger now. A hum beneath her skin that seemed to answer something in him. And when he extended his hand, as she found herself taking it, his palm was warm even through her glove, and the moment their skin touched, even separated by kid skin, the world sharpened. The night air became a symphony of scents: wet earth, horses, wood smoke, pine resin. She could hear heartbeats, multiple heartbeats, coming from inside the massive stone manor ahead. Could smell the tallow candles burning in the windows, the lamp oil, the faint metallic tang of iron gates. She pulled her hand back, breathless. Thaddeus's jaw tightened. You feel it. I don't know what I feel. Yes, you do. He was right. She did. And that terrified her more than anything else. The manor was nothing like the elegant, airy estates Margot was used to. This place was all dark stone and shadow, with narrow arched windows and thick walls that seemed designed to keep things out. Or in. Gas lamps flickered in iron sconces along the entrance hall, casting uneven light across wood-paneled walls and heavy tapestries that depicted hunting scenes. Wolves bringing down stags, men on horseback with longbows. The floors were flagstone, not polished wood. The air smelled of smoke and old stone, and something wilder underneath. A servant took her cloak. The blue wool she'd worn into the garden felt thin and useless now. Beneath it, her evening gown was pale gray silk, with black velvet trim at the bodice and sleeves. Respectable, modest, completely inadequate for wherever she'd ended up. The doctor was waiting in a warmly lit room that smelled of herbs and old books. Shelves lined every wall, packed with leather-bound volumes and glass jars filled with dried plants. A fire burned in a stone hearth, and beside it, an older man with silver hair and kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. Miss Sinclair, I'm Dr. Elias Merriweather. Please, sit. Margot sat in the chair he indicated. upholstered in worn burgundy velvet, acutely aware of Thaddeus standing near the door, silent and watchful. He'd removed his gloves. His hands were bare, scarred across the knuckles, like he'd broken them more than once. Dr. Merriweather examined her pulse, her eyes, the skin at her wrists, where he gently pushed back the edge of her glove. He asked questions in a voice that reminded her of her childhood physician, calm, measured, completely unafraid. Had she experienced any unusual dreams? Yes. Heightened senses? Yes. Unexplained anger or fear? Sometimes, especially in the past week. She answered honestly because lying suddenly felt impossible. When he finished, and he exchanged a look with Thaddeus, moon sickness, the doctor said gently. Early stage, but progressing quickly. The collapse was the first major symptom. If left untreated, the fever will return, stronger each time, until... He trailed off delicately. Until what? Margot demanded. Until your body completes the transformation violently, or shuts down entirely. The room tilted. There has to be another explanation, she said. A rational. This is the rational explanation. Dr. Merriweather's voice was kind but firm. You carry dormant shifter blood. Something triggered the awakening, perhaps proximity to another shifter, perhaps the phase of the moon, perhaps simple maturity. The moon sickness is your body's attempt to adapt. With proper care and guidance, you'll survive it. Without... He glanced at Thaddeus again. Well, and that's why you're here. Margot looked at the Baron. He stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable, one hand resting against the door frame like he needed the contact to stay grounded. How long? She asked. Until the sickness stabilizes. Dr. Merriweather considered. 3 weeks, perhaps 4. It varies. 3 weeks. A month of her life, held captive in this stone fortress by a man who claimed to be a wolf. And if I refuse treatment, if I go home? You'll collapse again within hours, Thaddeus said quietly. And when the council's trackers find you, and they will, because they monitor every border region for signs of unregistered awakening, they won't bring you to a doctor. They'll bring you to a holding facility designed for cases like yours. You'll be kept there, studied, potentially used as a bargaining tool against your family or mine. Your reputation will be destroyed. Your infirmary will close, and you'll never see daylight again. Margot's hands clenched in her lap, crushing the silk of her skirts. You're trying to frighten me. I'm trying to keep you alive. Why? The question burst out of her. Why do you care what happens to me? For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he crossed the room in 3 strides, the heels of his boots sharp against the stone floor, and crouched in front of her chair so their eyes were level. This close, she could see the tension in every line of his body, the rigid control, the way his pupils dilated when he looked at her, then contracted like he was forcing them back. Because the bond won't let me walk away, he said, very quietly. Doctor. Merriweather cleared his throat. I'll give you some privacy. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Margot couldn't look away from Thaddeus. What bond? Fated mate bond. His voice was rough, like the words cost him. It's rare, immediate, undeniable. 3 nights ago, I started dreaming of someone I'd never met. 2 nights ago, I couldn't stay indoors. Tonight, the moment I saw you in that garden, my wolf recognized you. And everything I thought I understood about control became irrelevant. That's impossible, a bitter smile. So is everything else you've learned tonight. But here's what you need to understand, Miss Sinclair. This bond isn't a choice. It's not romantic. It's a biological imperative that makes distance between us painful. For both of us. She thought of the pulling sensation, at the way the world had sharpened when he'd touched her hand, the way her body had calmed the moment she'd woken in his presence. How painful. For you? Fever, dizziness, eventual collapse. Your body will interpret separation as a threat to survival. He paused, his hands loose at his sides but trembling faintly. For me? Rage. Loss of control. My wolf will become unstable, violent. I'll be a danger to everyone around me. I've already sent half my household staff away, because I don't trust what I'll do if you leave. Margot pressed her hand to her chest. feeling her heart hammer beneath the structured bodice of her gown. So I'm trapped. Yes, at least he didn't lie. For how long? Until the bond settles, until your awakening completes, until we find a way to... He stopped, jaw tight. I don't know. She wanted to scream, to run, and to wake up in her own bed with her lady's maid pulling back the curtains and discover this was all a fever dream, brought on by too much charity work and not enough sleep. Instead, she forced herself to think. You said there's a council. They'll come looking for me. They already are. Elder Silas Hawthorne received word of unusual activity in this region 3 days ago. He's been waiting for an excuse to expand council authority, and an unregistered awakened from a noble family. Thaddeus shook his head. You're exactly the kind of prize he wants. Leverage over me. Proof that unmonitored territories are dangerous. A way to force registration laws even stricter than they already are. Then we tell him I'm under your protection. That won't be enough. He'll demand I hand you over for registration and observation, council facilities, council physicians, council control. And if I refuse, he'll use it as proof I'm unfit to govern my territory, that the bond has made me unstable, dangerous, incapable of putting pack law above personal obsession. Margot studied him, the sharp angles of his face cast in firelight, the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands were carefully loose at his sides like he was holding something back. Like his wolf was pressing at his skin, and only rigid discipline kept it leashed. You're an alpha, she said slowly, testing the word, but you still answer to this council. For now. And if they take me? His eyes went very dark. That won't happen. You can't promise that. Watch me. The absolute certainty in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it steadied something inside her. Margot took a breath, the boning of her corset creaking slightly with the movement. If I stay here, under your protection, what exactly does that entail? A suite of rooms in the East Wing. A chaperone, if you want one. I can send for Lady Pembroke by morning. She's a widow, well-respected, and owes me a favor. He paused. Freedom to move through the estate and grounds, within reason. Access to Dr. Merriweather for treatment. And my word that you won't be harmed. Your word. I know it means nothing to you yet, but it's all I can offer. She believed him, which was either the wisest or most foolish thing she'd ever done. I have conditions. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. Name them. I want to continue managing my charity work, letters to my household staff, access to my ledgers and accounts. As if the infirmary is going to survive, I need to renegotiate that coal contract, and I can't do that from behind closed doors with no communication. He nodded slowly. Agreed. Dr. Merriweather can act as courier. Anything you write will be delivered, unopened. I want a chaperone, not because I don't trust you, she added quickly, seeing his expression darken. Because I need to protect my reputation. If word gets out that I'm living under your roof unchaperoned, my family will be ruined. Every tenant family that depends on the Sinclair estate will suffer. Lady Pembroke, he said immediately. I'll send for her tonight. She can arrive by midday tomorrow. And I want the truth. About all of this. The council, the bond, what I'm becoming. Like no more half answers designed to manage me like I'm fragile. That's dangerous knowledge. I'm already in danger. I'd rather face it informed than blind. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he stood, offering his hand again. We have a deal, Miss Sinclair. She rose without taking his hand this time, needing the distance, needing to prove to herself she could still think clearly when he wasn't touching her. The room felt colder without the contact. The fire seemed dimmer. One more thing, she said. What? If I'm going to be trapped here for weeks, you're going to help me save my infirmary. His eyebrows rose. Help you. You said yourself you know about the coal supplier bleeding us dry. You're a baron with industrial investments and rail connections. You have leverage, I don't. She lifted her chin. So use it. For the first time since she'd woken in his carriage, Thaddeus Carrington smiled, a real smile, sharp and approving. You negotiate like you were born to it. I was born to manage an estate, keep tenants fed, and make impossible budgets work. This is just another problem that needs solving. And if I say no, Then I'll solve it myself. But it will take longer, and I'll be distracted. And you did say you wanted me focused on staying alive and stable." He laughed, a low, rough sound that did something dangerous to her pulse. "Ruthless," he murmured. "I wasn't expecting that. No one ever does." He extended his hand one more time. "Partners, then, for the duration of your convalescence." This time, she took it. The pull was still there, stronger now, like recognizing a song she'd heard in a dream. And her skin prickled where they touched, heat spreading up her arm despite the gloves between them. His pupils dilated, just slightly, and she watched him force them back to normal through sheer will. He released her hand and stepped back, putting 3 feet of space between them. His jaw was tight again. "Your rooms are ready. I'll have someone show you up." "Thank you." He turned to leave, then paused at the door, one hand resting against the dark wood frame. "Miss Sinclair?" "Yes?" "You could have fought me, screamed, run, refused every offer. Why didn't you?" Margot considered the question, considered the impossible truth of this night, the moon, the fever, the bond pulling her toward a stranger who claimed they were fated, considered the fact that her hands had stopped shaking the moment she'd woken near him, and that her body had made a choice before her mind had caught up. "Because," she said quietly, "you're right. I did feel something before I collapsed. And I've spent my whole life being told I was perfectly ordinary, perfectly safe, perfectly suited for drawing rooms and charity work and nothing more." She met his eyes. "If there's even a chance you're telling the truth, I need to know what I really am." Thaddeus looked at her for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression, not softness, but recognition. "You're dangerous," he said finally. "And you don't even know it yet." He left, and Margot stood alone in the warm room, surrounded by the smell of herbs and old books and wood smoke, feeling the pull of something vast and wild and utterly terrifying settling into her bones. Yet the suite was larger than her entire bedroom at home. High ceilings with dark wood beams, mullioned windows with heavy burgundy curtains already drawn against the night. A 4-poster bed dominated one wall, its midnight blue hangings embroidered with silver thread in patterns that might have been wolves or might have been decorative knots. She couldn't quite tell in the firelight. A fire burned in the stone grate, and someone had laid out a white lawn nightgown and silk robe across the bed. Simpler than what she usually wore, but fine quality. No corset, no petticoats, no layers of structured undergarments. The freedom of it was almost scandalous. A young woman appeared in the doorway, dark hair pulled back severely, sharp eyes, wearing a black dress with a crisp white apron and cap. A lady's maid, then. But though her bearing suggested she was more than just a servant. "Miss Sinclair, I'm Hannah. I'll be attending you during your stay. His lordship asked me to see if you needed anything." "Just sleep," Margot said honestly. Her entire body ached with exhaustion, and the room seemed to sway slightly, even though she was standing still. Hannah smiled, brief but genuine. "Of course, but first Dr. Merriweather left this." She held out a small glass vial filled with amber liquid. "For the fever, he said to take it before bed." Margot accepted the vial, sniffing cautiously. Lavender, chamomile, something bitter underneath. Valerian, perhaps. Willow bark. She hesitated. "I promise it's nothing sinister," Hannah said dryly. "If his lordship wanted you unconscious, he wouldn't bother with medicine. He'd just use the bond." Margot stared at her. Hannah's expression didn't change. "Everyone in this house knows what you are, miss, and what he is to you. No point pretending otherwise. Drink it or don't, but the fever will come back worse if you fight sleep." There was something steadying about the blunt honesty, about not being managed or coddled or lied to. Margot drank it. Within minutes, the exhaustion hit like a wave. She barely managed to change into the nightgown. Hannah helped with the buttons down her back and the laces of her corset, before her eyes started closing. She fell into the bed, the mattress softer than anything she'd ever known, and let the darkness take her. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was that she'd just agreed to stay in a stranger's house, bound by an impossible bond, preparing to become something she didn't understand. And somehow, the scariest part was how right it felt. Margot woke to unfamiliar sounds, not the soft rustle of her lady's maid drawing curtains, or the distant clatter of kitchen staff preparing breakfast in the Sinclair manner. This was sharper, boot heels on flagstone, low voices echoing through corridors, the creak of heavy doors opening and closing somewhere below. And beneath it all, something she shouldn't be able to hear. Heartbeats. Multiple heartbeats, steady and strong, moving through the house like a pulse. She sat up, disoriented. The midnight blue bed hangings caught the gray morning light filtering through the mullioned windows. The fire had burned down to embers in the grate. Her body felt different, stronger. The fever that had been building for days before her collapse, and the one that had made her skin feel too tight and her thoughts scatter, was gone. Not suppressed. Gone. She took a full breath without her ribs aching, flexed her fingers without trembling. The proximity was working. Her evening gown from last night lay folded on a chair. Someone had cleaned the garden dirt from the hem. Beside it, a day dress in deep green wool with black braiding at the cuffs and collar. Simple, well-made, sized exactly right. How had they known? A knock at the door. "Miss Sinclair," Hannah's voice, brisk and efficient. "May I come in?" "Yes." Hannah entered carrying a breakfast tray, porcelain, not silver, with steam rising from a covered dish. Behind her came another woman, older, wearing a traveling cloak over a burgundy day dress, her graying hair pinned severely beneath a black bonnet. "Lady Pembroke," Hannah said, "arrived an hour ago." The woman removed her bonnet, revealing sharp eyes and a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled, but might be persuaded under the right circumstances. "Miss Sinclair, Thaddeus sent word last night that you required a chaperone." Her voice was cultured, direct. "I'm here to ensure your reputation remains intact, and that you don't do anything foolish. In that order." Margot blinked. Thank you?" "Don't thank me yet. You're living under the roof of an unmated alpha king during your awakening. Every pack wife within 50 miles will be watching for scandal." Lady Pembroke set her cloak aside. "So we're going to be exceptionally careful. Hannah will attend you at all times. I will accompany you anywhere outside this wing. And you will not be alone with his lordship behind closed doors unless Dr. Merriweather or I am present." It should have felt suffocating. Instead, Margot felt oddly steadied. "I understand." "Good." Lady Pembroke's expression softened fractionally. "Now, eat your breakfast, get dressed, and then we'll discuss exactly what mess you've landed yourself in." By the time Margot was dressed, the green wool day dress fit perfectly. The corset laced snug but not punishing. The sun had fully risen. Hannah led her down narrow corridors, lined with more hunting tapestries, past closed doors and servants, who nodded but didn't speak. The breakfast room was smaller than she'd expected. Warm. A fire crackled in the hearth, and tall windows overlooked a walled garden where frost still clung to bare branches. The table was set for two. Thaddeus stood near the window, dressed in dark wool trousers and a charcoal waistcoat over a white shirt. No tailcoat this morning, no cravat. More informal, the shirt was open at the collar. Margot's pulse jumped before she could stop it. He turned when she entered, and something in his expression eased, like he'd been holding tension she couldn't see, and it had just released. "Miss Sinclair, Lady Pembroke." He nodded to both of them. "I trust you slept well." "Well enough," Margot said. "And I feel better, stronger than I have in days." His gaze sharpened slightly. "The fever?" "Gone." "Good." The single word carried weight. "Relief, maybe." "Dr. Merriweather will want to examine you later, but that's exactly what we hoped for. The proximity is stabilizing the worst of the symptoms." Lady Pembroke settled herself in a chair near the fire, pulling out embroidery from a small bag. Chaperoning, but not intruding. The message was clear. They could speak freely, but they weren't alone. Thaddeus gestured to the table. "Please, sit." The breakfast was simple: bread, butter, cold ham, tea. Margot ate mechanically, aware of him across from her, aware of the way the morning light caught the gold in his eyes. "I've sent Dr. Merriweather to your estate with your first letter," Thaddeus said quietly. "He'll deliver it to your household staff personally. No one else will read it." "Thank you." "I've also made inquiries about your coal supplier. The contract terms are worse than you described." Margot set down her tea. "Are how much worse?" The escalation clause is tied to fluctuating rail tariffs that don't exist. You're being charged for phantom costs. His mouth tightened. It's extortion dressed as commerce. Anger sparked hot in her chest. Can it be broken? Not easily, but it can be renegotiated if you have leverage. Which I don't. Which you didn't. He leaned back slightly. But I have rail investments, and your supplier needs access to my territory's routes. So now you have leverage. Margot stared at him. You'd use your business interest to help me renegotiate a charity contract. I'd use my business interest to stop a bastard from bleeding a women's infirmary dry. He paused. And because we made a deal. Partners, remember? Something warm unfurled in her chest. Not the bond pull, something simpler. Respect. What do you need from me, she asked. Records. Every invoice, every payment, every letter from the supplier. If I'm going to dismantle this contract, I need to know exactly how he's cheating you. I can write to my steward. He keeps copies of everything. Do it today. The sooner we move, the less time the council has to interfere. The word council hung in the air like smoke. Margot set down her fork carefully. Has Elder Hawthorne made contact yet? Thaddeus's expression went carefully blank. Not yet, but he will. He was wrong. Silas Hawthorne made contact before noon. Margot was in the library, a vast room lined floor to ceiling with leather-bound books. The smell of old paper and beeswax polish thick in the air when Thaddeus found her. She'd been writing letters at a mahogany desk near the window, and Lady Pembroke reading quietly in a chair nearby. Hours had passed, and Margot realized with mild surprise that her hand wasn't cramping. Her back didn't ache from sitting, and the familiar afternoon fatigue that usually settled over her hadn't come. The moon sickness would have left her weak by now, but proximity to Thaddeus, to the bond, was doing more than just preventing fever. It was making her stronger. Thaddeus's face was carved from stone when he entered. He sent a messenger. His voice was too controlled. Elder Hawthorne, officially requesting a council inspection of my household and territory. He's citing reports of unregistered shifter activity and concerns about territorial stability. Margot's pen stilled on the paper. When? 2 days. He'll arrive with a delegation. Thaddeus crossed to the desk. I'm moving like violence wrapped in discipline. They'll demand to see you, question you, assess whether you're being properly managed. Properly managed, Margot repeated, her voice flat. Their words, not mine. He braced his hands on the desk, leaning forward. This close, she could see the tension in every line of his body, could smell leather and smoke and something wild underneath. If they decide I'm unfit to oversee your awakening, they can remove you by force. Pack law allows it. Lady Pembroke set down her book. Can you refuse the inspection? Not without giving Silas exactly what he wants. Proof I'm prioritizing personal interest over pack law. Thaddeus straightened. But I can control the terms. Limit the inspection to public areas. Require council witnesses for any questioning. And make it harder for him to manufacture evidence. Evidence of what? Margot asked. His eyes met hers. That the bond has made me unstable. That I'm keeping you here against your will. That you're a danger to yourself and others. He paused. All of which can be twisted to look true if he asks the right questions the wrong way. Margot thought of the pulling sensation, the way her body had calmed in his presence, the fever that would return if she left. Then we need to make sure his questions don't matter. Thaddeus tilted his head slightly. How? By proving I'm not helpless or dangerous. Margot stood, squaring her shoulders despite the tight bodice of her dress. If I'm calm, coherent, and clearly here by choice, what can he claim? That I'm being coerced? I'll tell him the truth. That you offered protection and I accepted it. He won't believe you. Then we make him believe me. She met his gaze steadily. You said you need to control the terms. So do I. I want to be present when he arrives. I want to speak for myself. And I want him to see that I'm not some fragile girl who needs locking away. Something shifted in Thaddeus's expression. Not quite a smile. Something fiercer. You want to negotiate with a council elder. I want to survive this without losing my freedom or my mind. Margot lifted her chin. And if that means negotiating with wolves in human skin, then I'll do it. Lady Pembroke made a soft sound. Approval, maybe, or dark amusement. Thaddeus looked at Margot for a long moment, and she felt the weight of his focus like a physical thing. The bond hummed between them, steady and insistent. "It's all right," he said finally. "But first, you need to understand what you're walking into. The pack hierarchy, council law, how they'll try to trap you in contradictions." He glanced at Lady Pembroke. "Can you spare her for a few hours? As long as I'm present." "The study, then. I have documents you should see." The study was all dark wood and leather, maps pinned to the walls showing territory boundaries and rail lines. A massive desk dominated the center, covered in papers and ledgers. Thaddeus pulled out a slim folder. "Patrol reports from the past month. Dr. Merriweather compiled them this morning." Margot opened it, Lady Pembroke reading over her shoulder. The reports were meticulous. Dates, times, locations, patrol members, incidents noted. Most were routine, boundary checks, rogue sightings in distant sectors, and minor disputes between pack families, but 3 reports stood out. "These dates," Margot said slowly, tracing her finger down the page, "they don't align." Thaddeus leaned closer, his shoulder nearly brushing hers as he studied the document. She felt the heat of him, caught the scent of smoke and pine, and her breath hitched before she could stop it. He stilled for half a second, awareness crackling between them, then deliberately stepped back, putting proper distance between them. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice rougher than before. Margot forced herself to focus on the page, not on the way her skin still prickled from his nearness. "This report says a southern boundary patrol encountered rogue scent markers on the 19th. But this report," she flipped back 2 pages. "It says the same patrol team was assigned to the northern sector that day. They can't have been in both places." Silence. Lady Pembroke's eyes sharpened. "An error in the logs? Or someone falsified a report?" Margot pulled out another page. "And here, this incident on the 22nd. Unusual activity near Sinclair border. But the description is vague. No specifics, no follow-up. Just a note that it was reported to council oversight." Thaddeus went very still. "Who filed that report?" Margot checked the signature at the bottom. "Patrol Captain Morris. Morris reports directly to the council liaison." Thaddeus's voice was soft, dangerous. "He's one of Silas's men." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. "He manufactured evidence," Margot said. "False reports of instability and rogue activity, and enough to justify a council inspection." "And if the inspection finds nothing," Lady Pembroke added quietly, "Silas will claim you're hiding the evidence. Either way, he wins." Margot set the folder down, her mind racing. "Unless we prove the reports were falsified before he arrives." "How?" Thaddeus asked. She thought of the benevolence ledger back home, the way she'd learned to cross-reference accounts, catch discrepancies, track patterns in spending that revealed theft or fraud. This was the same, just higher stakes. "We compare these patrol reports against other records. Household logs, gate records, even weather reports if you have them. If Morris says a patrol was in 2 places at once, someone else will have documented where they actually were." Thaddeus stared at her. "You want to audit my territory records?" "I want to catch a liar before he uses false evidence to take me away." He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Then he turned to the shelves, pulling down leather-bound ledgers. "Gate logs. Every person entering or leaving the estate is recorded. Time, date, destination." Margot opened the first one. "Then let's start there." They worked through the afternoon, cross-referencing reports against gate logs and household records. Lady Pembroke helped, her sharp eyes catching details Margot might have missed. And slowly, the pattern emerged. Morris had filed 4 reports over 3 weeks, each claiming unusual activity or rogue sightings near Sinclair territory. But the gate logs proved his patrol teams had been nowhere near those locations on those dates, as he'd fabricated incidents to build a case for council intervention. "This is enough," Thaddeus said quietly, leaning back in his chair. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, catching dust motes in the golden light. "We can discredit him, force Silas to withdraw the inspection. Or," Margot said carefully, "we let the inspection happen, but we control it." He frowned. "Explain." "If we expose Morris now, Silas will just find another excuse. Another manufactured crisis. He wants leverage over you, and he'll keep pushing until he finds it. She tapped the ledger. But if we let him come, let him question me. And I prove I'm here willingly and capable. While you present this evidence that his own liaison falsified reports, then we don't just win this fight, we discredit his entire case. Lady Pembroke made a thoughtful sound. Risky, but clever. Thaddeus studied Margot with an intensity that made her skin prickle. You want to use yourself as bait. I want to prove I'm not prey. The silence stretched between them, charged with something more than just strategy. Finally, he nodded. We'll do it your way, but I'm setting conditions. Such as? The interview happens in the Great Hall, with witnesses. Dr. Merriweather present as medical authority, Lady Pembroke as chaperone, and at least 3 neutral pack members as observers. Silas doesn't get you alone. Agreed. And if at any point I think you're in danger, if the bond flares, if he threatens you, if anything feels wrong, I'm ending it. No argument. Margot wanted to protest, but she saw the rigid set of his shoulders, the way his hands had curled into fists against the desk. He was terrified for her, and in trying desperately not to show it. Agreed, she said quietly. His eyes closed briefly, relief flickering across his face. When he looked at her again, something had shifted. You found the lie in 6 hours. My own patrol captain has been filing false reports for weeks, and I missed it. You weren't looking for betrayal from your own people. That's not an excuse. It's a failure. He stood, pacing to the window. I should have seen it. Now you have, Margot said. And now we know. He turned back to her, and the late sun lit him from behind, making him look carved from shadow and gold. You think like a strategist. I think like someone who's spent years keeping an estate running on impossible budgets, while men tried to cheat us at every turn. She closed the ledger. I just never had the authority to do anything about it before. You have authority now. His voice was rough. Anything you need, anyone who tries to undermine you, any resource you want to solve this, it's yours. The weight of that offer settled over her. I'm going to hold you to that. I'm counting on it. That evening, Margot sat with Lady Pembroke in the smaller drawing room, a fire crackling low in the grate. Gas lamps had been lit as the sun set, casting warm golden light across the paneled walls. She'd changed for dinner into a dark blue silk dress, with black lace at the bodice, again, perfectly fitted, again appearing in her room without explanation. How did he know my measurements? Margot asked quietly. Lady Pembroke didn't look up from her embroidery. The bond. He likely has every detail of you memorized whether he wants to or not. Height, build, the exact curve of your wrist. She pulled the thread through fabric. It's not romantic. It's instinct. It feels like an invasion. It is. That's why you need boundaries. Margot thought of the way Thaddeus had stepped back every time they'd touched. The rigid control, the careful distance. He's trying, she said. He is. Lady Pembroke knotted the thread. But the bond will push harder as your awakening progresses. You'll both want things you shouldn't. And restraint only lasts so long. Before Margot could respond, the door opened. Gideon Frost, Thaddeus's beta, who she'd met briefly at dinner, stood in the doorway, his expression grim. Miss Sinclair, his lordship needs you, now. Margot stood, her heart kicking against her ribs. But what's happened? Council enforcers, at the gates. They're demanding entry under pack law. The great hall was chaos. 3 men stood just inside the entrance, wearing dark traveling cloaks over formal dress. Council enforcers. Margot recognized the silver pins at their collars, the wolf head insignia that marked official pack authority. Thaddeus stood between them and the staircase, Gideon at his right shoulder. Every line of his body radiated lethal control. You have no authority here, Thaddeus said, his voice deadly calm. The inspection is scheduled for 2 days, not tonight. The lead enforcer, older, gray-haired, with cold eyes, smiled without warmth. Elder Hawthorne received intelligence that the unregistered awakened may be unstable. He had us stationed nearby in case immediate intervention became necessary. And for her safety and the safety of your household, we're authorized to take her into council custody. So that was it. Silas had planned this from the beginning. The official inspection was theater. The real move was tonight. She's not unstable, Thaddeus said. She's under medical care. Then you won't mind if we verify that. The enforcer's gaze shifted past Thaddeus, landing on Margot at the top of the stairs. Miss Sinclair, please come with us. You're not in trouble. We simply need to ensure you're being properly cared for. Lady Pembroke's hand closed around Margot's elbow, firm and warning. Every instinct screamed at Margot to run, to hide, to let Thaddeus handle this. But she'd spent hours proving she wasn't helpless, wasn't prey. She descended the stairs, Lady Pembroke a silent shadow at her side. I appreciate your concern, Margot said, keeping her voice steady. But I'm here voluntarily and receiving excellent care from Dr. Merriweather. There's no need for counsel custody. That's not your decision to make, the enforcer said gently, too gently. You're in the early stages of awakening. You can't be expected to make rational choices about your own welfare. The condescension in his tone made her teeth clench. I assure you, I'm perfectly rational. Of course you think you are. He took a step forward. But the bond affects judgment. Makes you believe you're safe when you're not. That's why counsel law requires oversight in cases like yours. Thaddeus moved, placing himself between Margot and the enforcer. You're done talking. Leave, now. We have authority. You have a piece of paper authorizing an inspection in 2 days. You do not have authority to seize anyone from my household tonight. Thaddeus's voice dropped to something barely human. And if you try, you'll learn exactly how unstable I can be. The enforcer's smile vanished. Is that a threat against council representatives? It's a promise to protect what's mine. The air in the hall shifted, grew heavy. Margot felt it like pressure against her skin. Wild, dangerous, barely leashed. The bond flared, hot and insistent. And she knew without being told. Thaddeus was seconds from losing control. The second enforcer moved suddenly, lunging past Thaddeus toward Margot. Gideon intercepted him, slamming him against the wall with controlled precision. But the third enforcer was faster. He grabbed Margot's arm, yanking her toward the door. Lady Pembroke shouted something. Thaddeus roared, and a sound that was not remotely human, and the world exploded. Margot had never seen anything move that fast. One moment, Thaddeus was 10 feet away. The next, he'd crossed the distance in a blur, his hand closing around the enforcer's throat. The man released Margot instantly, gasping, clawing at Thaddeus's grip. Don't touch her. The enforcer's face was turning purple. Gideon appeared at Thaddeus's shoulder. My lord, let him go. You're giving them exactly what they want. For a horrible moment, Margot thought he wouldn't listen. Then Thaddeus released the man, shoving him away hard enough to send him stumbling. The lead enforcer's hand went to something at his belt, a short club, iron-tipped. Stand down, he ordered, by authority of the Pack Council. Get out of my house. Thaddeus's voice was barely recognizable. Rough. I layered with something animal. Before I forget why killing you would be a mistake. The three enforcers exchanged glances. Then, slowly, they backed toward the door. Elder Hawthorne will hear about this, the leader said. Your refusal to cooperate. Your violence against council representatives. The bond making you a danger to your own pack. Good, Thaddeus snarled. Let him hear it. And let him know that if he sends anyone else to take her, I'll make what happened tonight look like mercy. They left. The heavy door slammed shut behind them. Silence crashed over the hall. Thaddeus stood motionless, his back to Margot, his shoulders heaving with each breath. She could see his hands shaking, fine tremors that got worse with every second. Everyone out, Gideon said quietly. Now. The servants scattered. Lady Pembroke hesitated, and then touched Margot's shoulder. Come with me. No. Margot's eyes were locked on Thaddeus, on the rigid line of his spine, on the way he was holding himself perfectly still, like movement would shatter whatever control he had left. Something's wrong. The bond, Lady Pembroke's voice was urgent. When you were threatened, it triggered a protective response. He needs to shift or he'll hurt someone. We need to leave him space. I'm not leaving him. Margot, but Margot was already moving, crossing the hall toward Thaddeus. She could feel it now, the pull between them, stronger than it had ever been, vibrating with panic and rage and something primal. "Don't come closer." Thaddeus's voice was strangled. "I can't. I'm not safe right now. You won't hurt me. You don't know that." She stopped 3 feet away, close enough to see the sweat on his neck, the way his muscles were locked rigid beneath his shirt. "Look at me," she said quietly. "No. Thaddeus, look at me." Slowly, he turned. His eyes were wrong. The pupils too large, swallowing the gold until only thin rings remained. His skin was flushed, and she could see his pulse hammering at his throat. "I need you to go upstairs," he said through clenched teeth. "Lock your door. Don't come out until Gideon tells you it's safe." "What's happening to you?" "The wolf wants out. And if I shift here, in this house, I could destroy half the building. I need to get to the grounds, but I can't move while you're this close, because every instinct I have is screaming at me to stay between you and that door." Margot looked at Gideon. "Can you protect the household?" "Yes." She looked back at Thaddeus. "Todd, then I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. They tried to take me. The bond is reacting because I was threatened. If I stay here and you go alone, it'll just get worse." She lifted her chin. "You said distance causes pain for both of us, so we don't use distance. We use space where you can shift safely." His eyes closed. "You don't understand what you're offering to witness. Then show me." The grounds behind the manor were vast. Forest pressed close on 3 sides, and beyond that, nothing but moorland and darkness. Thaddeus had barely made it outside before the tremors got worse. Margot stood 20 feet back, Lady Pembroke beside her. The older woman had refused to let her go alone. Propriety be damned. Gideon waited at the edge of the tree line, watchful. "You should go inside," Thaddeus said, his voice rough. He'd already stripped off his waistcoat and shirt, and even in the moonlight, Margot could see the way his muscles moved wrong beneath his skin, like something else was pushing out from the inside. "No. Margot, I need to see this. I need to know what I'm becoming," he laughed, bitter and sharp. "You'll be nothing like this. You'll be graceful, controlled. This what I am when I let go? It's violent, monstrous. Show me anyway." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded just once and stepped back. "Don't scream," he said. "The wolf will interpret it as fear and react badly." "I won't scream." He closed his eyes, took 1 breath, 2, and let go. The change was not gentle. His spine arched, bones cracking and reforming with sounds that made Margot's stomach turn. His skin rippled, a fur erupting in dark waves across his shoulders, down his arms. His face elongated, face stretching, teeth sharpening into something designed for killing. His hands became paws, claws digging into the frozen earth. It took less than 30 seconds, and when it was done, a massive wolf stood where Thaddeus had been. He was enormous, easily the size of a horse, with midnight dark fur and eyes that still held those rings of gold. His shoulders were broad and powerful, built for taking down prey 5 times Margot's size. He should have been terrifying. He was terrifying. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. Recognition, the bond humming with rightness, with the certainty that this was him, all of him, not hidden or controlled or leashed by human skin. The wolf's gaze locked on hers. She didn't move, didn't run. "Hello," she said, quietly. The wolf's ears twitched forward. He took 1 step toward her, then another, moving with predatory grace. Lady Pembroke tensed beside her, but Margot shook her head fractionally. The wolf stopped 5 feet away, close enough that she could see the intelligence in his eyes, close enough to smell earth and pine and wild things, close enough to kill her in half a second if he wanted. He lowered his head slowly, a gesture of, what? Submission? Trust? Margot's hand moved before she could think better of it, reaching out. The wolf went absolutely still. Her fingers touched the fur at his shoulder, coarse and thick, warm beneath her palm. His heartbeat thundered beneath her hand, fast and strong. "You're beautiful," she whispered. The wolf made a sound, low, almost a whine, and leaned fractionally into her touch. And for 1 perfect moment, everything was still. The bond settled, calm and certain, like a chord finally resolving. Then the wolf pulled back, shook himself once, and turned toward the forest. He ran. Margot watched him disappear into the trees, her hand still tingling where she'd touched him. "Well," Lady Pembroke said faintly, "that was monumentally foolish. I know. You could have been killed. I know. And yet you'd do it again." Margot looked at the older woman. "Yes," Lady Pembroke sighed. "You're going to make his life very complicated. I think it already was." They stood in silence, waiting. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, movement at the tree line. Thaddeus emerged, human again, wearing only his trousers, carrying his discarded shirt. His skin was flushed, his hair wild, his breathing still rough. But his eyes were clear, calm. He stopped when he saw her still standing there. "You stayed. I said I would." He crossed the distance between them slowly, like he was giving her time to change her mind, to run, to realize what she'd just done. She didn't move. When he was close enough to touch, he stopped. "You touched me," he said quietly. "While I was shifted. No one's ever," he stopped, tension visible in his shoulders. "Most people run." "I'm not most people." "No." Something flickered in his expression. "You're not." The air between them was charged, humming with more than just the bond, with the memory of her hand in his fur, with the certainty that something fundamental had shifted between them. "I need you to understand something," Thaddeus said. "What you saw tonight, that's what I am. Violence wrapped in control. I'm a predator pretending to be civilized. That's not all you are. It's enough." "No." Margot held his gaze. "You shifted to protect me. You could have hurt those enforcers badly, but you didn't. You're not a monster, Thaddeus. You're just afraid of becoming one." His eyes closed. "You have no idea what I'm capable of. Then tell me, no more half-truths. No more protecting me from information because you think I can't handle it." She stepped closer. "We made a deal. Partners. That means honesty, even when it's ugly." When he opened his eyes again, something had changed. A decision made. "All right," he said quietly. "Come inside, and I'll tell you everything." They ended up in his private study, smaller than the formal one, more personal. Books lined the walls, and a fire burned low in the grate, supplemented by gas lamps that cast warm pools of light across the leather furniture. Lady Pembroke stationed herself in a chair near the door, a silent guardian. Thaddeus had pulled on his shirt but hadn't bothered with the buttons. He poured himself whiskey from a crystal decanter, drank it in one swallow, then poured another. "The bond," he said finally, "isn't just proximity and pain. It's a reshaping of priorities, of instincts, of everything you thought you understood about yourself." Margot sat in the chair across from his desk. "I know, I feel it too. Not like this. Not yet." He set down the glass. "For an alpha, the bond is obsessive, consuming. Every decision I make is filtered through one question. Will this keep you safe? And if the answer is no, my wolf doesn't care about consequences. Doesn't care about pack law or council authority or civilization itself. So tonight I almost killed 3 council representatives because one of them grabbed your arm." His voice was flat. "Not because they were a real threat, not because you were in actual danger, but because the bond decided they'd touched what was mine, and my wolf wanted blood for it." Margot absorbed that. "But you didn't kill them. Because Gideon stopped me, because you were watching, because some part of me still remembers that killing council enforcers would destroy everything." He laughed, sharp and bitter. "That's the leash, Margot. That's all that's left. And it's fraying. What happens if it breaks? Then Silas wins. I'll be declared unfit, removed from authority, possibly exiled. And then you'll be taken into council custody regardless. So we don't let it break." He stared at her. "You say that like it's simple." "It is simple. Difficult, but simple." She leaned forward. "You're afraid the bond will make you lose control. But you've been in control all along. You stopped yourself tonight. You shifted instead of killing. You're still making choices. For now. Then we work with for now. We survive the inspection. We expose Morris's lies. We prove to Silas that neither of us is unstable." She held his gaze. "And we do it as partners. Not you protecting me, not me as a liability. Equal strategy, equal risk." Thaddeus looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. You don't understand what you're asking for. I understand perfectly. I'm asking you to trust me. At the way you trusted me to find the lies in those reports. The way I trusted you when I touched your wolf." She paused. "We're stronger together than we are with you trying to shield me from everything." Silence stretched between them. Finally, he nodded. "Equal partners. No more half-truths. No more protection without consultation." "Agreed. And if something happens, if the bond pushes too hard, if I start losing it, you tell me, immediately. If you do the same, deal." He extended his hand across the desk. Margot took it. The bond flared, warm and certain, and she felt it settle into something new. Not ownership, not possession, partnership. When she pulled her hand back, something in his expression had eased. "Get some rest," he said quietly. "Tomorrow we prepare for Silas, and we do it your way." Margot stood, the Lady Pembroke rising with her. At the door she paused. "Thaddeus?" "Yes?" "Thank you for trusting me." His eyes caught the firelight, gold and dark and utterly focused on her. "Thank you for not running." She made it back to her room before the exhaustion hit. Dr. Merriweather was waiting in the corridor, his medical bag in hand. Lady Pembroke nodded to him. "I thought it wise to check on Miss Sinclair after tonight's excitement," he said mildly. Inside her room, he examined her pulse, her eyes, pressed his fingers gently to the sides of her throat. "The moon sickness?" Margot asked. "Stable. Better than stable, actually." He stepped back, satisfied. "The proximity is doing exactly what we hoped. Your body is adapting without the violent swings. As long as you remain near the Baron, the symptoms should continue to ease." He paused. Though I suspect tonight's adrenaline didn't help your nerves. I'm fine." "You're resilient," he corrected gently. "There's a difference. Don't mistake one for the other." He packed his instruments away. "Try to sleep. Tomorrow will be demanding." When he left, Margot changed into her nightgown with Hannah's help, then dismissed the maid for the night. She lay in the darkness, listening to the house settle around her, and thought about wolves and bonds, and the way Thaddeus's eyes had looked when she'd called him beautiful. The scariest part was still how right it all felt. The next morning arrived with gray skies and frost. Margot woke early, dressed with Hannah's efficient help in a deep plum wool dress with jet buttons down the bodice. Severe, respectable. The kind of thing that said she was not a fragile creature to be managed. And she pinned her hair back tightly, checked her reflection, and felt a strange calm settle over her. Today she would face Elder Silas Hawthorne, and she would not flinch. Dr. Merriweather arrived with breakfast and a leather folder. "Your steward's response," he said. "Every invoice and letter related to the coal contract. He expressed concern about your absence, but I assured him you were well cared for." Margot opened the folder, scanning the contents. Everything she'd asked for, meticulously organized. "How is the Baron?" she asked. "Awake since before dawn, preparing the great hall." Dr. Merriweather paused. "He's tightly controlled this morning. The wolf is close to the surface. Because he's terrified something will go wrong and you'll be taken from him," the doctor said gently. "If something goes wrong, his control will snap instantly. Understand that won't be weakness. That will be the bond protecting what it's claimed." She nodded. "I understand." "Good. Now eat. You'll need your strength." The great hall had been transformed into a formal hearing chamber. Chairs arranged in a semicircle facing a single seat, clearly meant for Margot. Witnesses lined the walls, pack members, household staff, Dr. Merriweather in his formal black coat. Lady Pembroke sat near the front, her expression coolly aristocratic. Gideon stood near the entrance, arms crossed. Thaddeus stood near the windows in full formal attire, black tailcoat, gray waistcoat, white cravat tied with precision. Every inch the Baron, every inch the Alpha King. But Margot could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands were clasped behind his back. He looked at her as she entered, and something in his expression eased fractionally. "Miss Sinclair," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Are you ready?" "Yes." "Remember, you don't have to answer anything that makes you uncomfortable. I'll be fine." His eyes said he didn't believe that, but he nodded. A bell chimed outside, the gate signal. "They're here," Gideon said quietly. Margot took her seat. Lady Pembroke moved to stand just behind her chair, a silent statement of support and propriety. The doors opened. Elder Silas Hawthorne entered like he owned the place. He was tall, silver-haired, dressed in expensive dark wool with a council pin at his collar, the same wolf head insignia the enforcers had worn. His face was handsome in a cold, aristocratic way, and in his eyes swept the room with the confidence of a man used to being obeyed. Behind him came 4 others, 3 council members she didn't recognize, and Patrol Captain Morris. Margot's gaze locked on Morris. He looked nervous, a thin man with sharp features and restless hands. He avoided looking at Thaddeus. "Baron Carrington," Silas said, his voice smooth and cultured. "Thank you for accommodating this inspection. I trust we can proceed with civility." "That depends entirely on you," Thaddeus replied. Silas smiled, a predator's smile, and turned his attention to Margot. "Miss Sinclair, how lovely to finally meet you. I've heard so much." She inclined her head. "Elder Hawthorne, I hope you understand this is purely precautionary. The council has a duty to ensure all awakening shifters receive proper care and guidance." He moved closer, studying her with unsettling intensity. "Tell me, are you here of your own free will?" "I am." "And the Baron has not coerced you in any way?" "No. Not even through the bond." His tone was sympathetic, concerned. "I understand fated bonds can be quite overwhelming, especially for someone inexperienced. The pull can feel like choice when it's actually compulsion." Margot kept her voice steady. "I understand the difference between influence and compulsion, Elder Hawthorne. I am here because it's the safest place for me during my awakening. Baron Carrington offered protection, and I accepted it." "Under what terms?" "Chaperoned accommodation, continued access to my household affairs, medical care from Dr. Merriweather, and partnership in matters that concern my welfare." Silas's eyebrows rose. "Partnership. That's an unusual arrangement for an alpha and an unregistered awakened." "Perhaps, but it's the arrangement we made." "And if I were to tell you that the Baron is required by pack law to hand you over to council supervision, would you still feel this was a partnership?" The trap was elegantly laid. If she said yes, she looked naive. If she said no, she looked coerced. Margot met his eyes. "I would say that pack law should account for individual circumstances. I'm not a danger to myself or others. I'm receiving excellent medical care, and I'm making informed decisions about my own welfare. Removing me from a stable situation into an uncertain one doesn't serve anyone's interests, except perhaps those who want leverage over Baron Carrington." Silence rippled through the hall. Silas's smile thinned. "You have strong opinions for someone so newly awakened." "I have strong opinions because I've spent my life managing complex situations with limited authority. This is simply another problem that requires clear thinking. And if your clear thinking is compromised by the bond, then I would expect Dr. Merriweather to say so. He examines me daily." Margot glanced at the physician. "Doctor, do you believe the bond has compromised my judgment?" Dr. Merriweather stepped forward. "No, Elder. Miss Sinclair's cognition is excellent. She's calm, rational, and making decisions consistent with her established character. The bond provides proximity comfort, but it hasn't diminished her autonomy." "How convenient," Silas murmured. Thaddeus moved slightly, a subtle shift that put him closer to Margot's chair. Silas noticed. "Baron, you seem tense. I seem protective. There's a difference." "Is there?" Silas turned back to the council members. "Gentlemen, please note the Baron's positioning. Classic mate-guarding behavior. He can barely stand to have space between himself and the unregistered awakened. Her name," Thaddeus said softly, "is Miss Sinclair." "Of course. My apologies." Silas didn't sound apologetic at all. He pulled a paper from his coat. "Now, regarding the reports that prompted this inspection, Captain Morris filed several concerning incidents over the past month. Rogue activity, unusual territorial behavior, signs of instability." He looked at Thaddeus. "So would you care to address these?" This was it. The moment they'd prepared for. Thaddeus's expression didn't change. "I would." Captain Morris filed false reports. Morris went rigid. "That's a serious accusation," Silas said mildly. "It's a provable fact." Thaddeus gestured to Gideon, who came forward with the ledgers they'd compiled. These are gate logs, household records, and patrol schedules. Cross-referenced against Morris's incident reports, they show clear discrepancies. Morris claimed patrols were in locations they never visited. He reported incidents on dates when the assigned teams were elsewhere. Silas took the ledgers, flipping through them with a frown. Captain Morris, explain. Morris's face had gone pale. There must be some clerical error, Elder. I filed my reports in good faith. You filed 4 false reports over 3 weeks, Margot said quietly, each one designed to build a case for council intervention in Baron Carrington's territory. The question is, were you acting alone or under instruction? Morris's gaze darted to Silas, then away. Too fast, too obvious. Murmurs rippled through the watching pack members. Silas's expression hardened. Captain Morris, did you falsify these reports? Elder, you told me to document any unusual. I told you to document facts, not invent them. Silas's voice was ice. If you fabricated evidence, you've compromised this entire inspection. He was throwing Morris to the wolves, cutting him loose to save himself. Elder Hawthorne, Margot said, surely you're not suggesting Captain Morris acted without any guidance? He reports directly to your council liaison. He would have no motive to falsify reports unless someone wanted ammunition against Baron Carrington. Silas turned to her, and for the first time, she saw real anger in his eyes. Be very careful, Miss Sinclair. Accusing a council elder of conspiracy is a serious matter. I'm not accusing. I'm asking a logical question. She held his gaze. If the reports are false, and Captain Morris had no personal motive, then who benefits from creating a pretext for intervention? That's enough. Silas's voice cracked like a whip. He turned to the other council members. Clearly, this household is more unstable than the reports indicated. The unregistered awakened is displaying inappropriate aggression, and the Baron has obviously encouraged this behavior. I move for immediate transfer to council supervision. On what grounds? Thaddeus demanded. On the grounds that she's unsafe here. Silas gestured to Margot. She's confrontational, manipulative, and clearly influenced by the bond to defend you against legitimate council oversight. Or, Lady Pembroke said coolly from her position behind Margot's chair, she's intelligent, well-reasoned, and unwilling to be gaslit by a man who sent enforcers in the middle of the night to seize her illegally. Silas's face flushed. You forget yourself, madam. I forget nothing. I am Lady Clarice Pembroke, widow of Lord Henry Pembroke, and I have more social standing than half this council combined. I have been chaperoning Miss Sinclair since her arrival, and I can attest she has been treated with perfect propriety and respect. Your insinuations are baseless. The council members shifted uncomfortably. This was going wrong. Silas was losing control of the narrative, and desperate men made dangerous choices. Enough, Silas said. Baron Carrington, I'm invoking elder authority. You will hand over Miss Sinclair to council custody, or I will cite you for defying pack law. Thaddeus smiled, a terrible smile. Go ahead, cite me, and I'll file counter-charges of evidence fabrication, conspiracy, and abuse of council authority. We'll let the High Council decide who's defying pack law. You can't, I can, and I will. Thaddeus crossed his arms. You came here expecting to find an unstable alpha and a helpless girl. Instead, you found documented proof your own liaison falsified reports, and a woman who can defend herself verbally better than most barristers. And so now you're scrambling for any pretext to save this disaster of an inspection. Silas's hands clenched. You're bound by pack law. I am bound by many things. Thaddeus's voice dropped. And you should be very careful which bindings you try to exploit. Something flickered in Silas's expression. Satisfaction. Too late, Margot realized. Thaddeus had just given him an opening. Bound by many things, Silas repeated slowly. Yes, let's discuss that, shall we? Silas turned to the assembled council members, his voice taking on a formal tone. Gentlemen, I believe we need to address a matter of binding oaths. Baron Carrington, would you care to tell Miss Sinclair about the sigil oath you swore to this council 15 years ago? Thaddeus went absolutely still. Margot's stomach dropped. What oath? She asked quietly. Silas smiled. Ah, the one that binds him to council decree. A magical oath sworn in blood that compels obedience to council authority. It was the price of his title, Alpha King, in exchange for absolute loyalty to pack law as interpreted by council elders. The hall erupted in whispers. Margot looked at Thaddeus. His face was carved from stone, but she could see the muscle jumping in his jaw. "Is this true?" she asked. "Yes." The word was forced out. "And this oath, it can compel you. If a council elder invokes it directly with proper authority, yes. It causes pain, loss of control. If I resist too hard, the wolf takes over completely." Her blood turned to ice. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it's the one weapon I hoped Silas wouldn't use. The one binding I can't break without destroying myself." He met her eyes. "And because I was afraid if you knew, you'd see me as just another cage." Silas's voice cut through. "So, Baron Carrington, let me be clear. If I, as senior council elder present, invoke the sigil oath and order you to surrender Miss Sinclair to council custody, you must comply, correct?" Thaddeus's hands were shaking. "Correct." "Wonderful." Silas turned to Margot, and his smile was poison. "You see, Miss Sinclair, your partner is bound by forces beyond your clever arguments. He serves the council first, you second. He always has." Margot felt the floor tilt beneath her. This was the betrayal, not intentional. Thaddeus hadn't lied, he'd just omitted. But the effect was the same. She'd thought they were equal partners, and all along there was a leash she hadn't known about. "However," Silas continued, "I'm not unreasonable, Baron, and if you agree to certain terms, I won't need to invoke the oath." "What terms?" Thaddeus's voice was granite. "Voluntary transfer of Miss Sinclair to council supervision for the remainder of her awakening. No legal challenges, no interference. And you accept formal censure for allowing an unregistered awakened to remain unsupervised this long." "No." "Think carefully. If I invoke the oath, you'll be forced to comply anyway. And the pain will be considerable. This way, at least, you maintain some dignity." Margot watched Thaddeus struggle, watched him try to find any loophole, any escape, and find nothing. The oath was absolute, and Silas had won. Unless an idea crystallized. Risky, possibly disastrous, but the only card she had left to play. "Elder Hawthorne," Margot said clearly, "before you invoke any oaths, I have information you should hear." He turned to her, eyebrows raised. "Oh?" "About my bloodline." She stood, ignoring Lady Pembroke's sharp intake of breath. "You've been treating me as a common, unregistered awakened. But I'm not. My maternal line traces back to the Thornfield Lunas, the last recorded Luna bloodline in this region. It went dormant 3 generations ago, but clearly it's awakened in me." Silas went very still. "That's impossible. The Thornfield line died out. The title died out. The blood didn't." Margot pulled a folded letter from her sleeve, one she'd found among her steward's documents this morning. The genealogy record she'd requested weeks ago, before she'd understood what she was becoming. She'd filed it away as mere curiosity then. Now it was a weapon. The letter confirmed it. Helena Thornfield, my maternal great-grandmother, documented Luna line. Whether Silas already knew or was discovering it with her didn't matter. The law was clear. "Luna blood," one of the council members breathed. "If that's true." "Then she's not just any awakened," Silas said slowly, his eyes gleaming. "She's a potential Luna. Rare, valuable, strategically important." He smiled. "Which makes council supervision even more critical. We can't risk such a bloodline being mismanaged." Damn, she'd overplayed it. Given him more ammunition, not less. But she wasn't done. "You're right," Margot said. "Luna blood is rare, which means I have certain rights under old pack law. Rights that supersede standard council authority over unregistered awakened. Including the right to choose my own alpha bond, and the right to refuse council custody if I'm already under recognized alpha protection." "Where did you—" Silas stopped, his eyes narrowing. "You've been reading pack law." "I've been reading everything I could find in Baron Carrington's library." Margot lifted her chin. "And according to the Covenant of Ancestral Rights, Any woman of confirmed Luna lineage cannot be forcibly removed from an alpha's protection without her explicit consent, even by council order. Silence. Silas looked at the other council members. One of them, an older man with gray whiskers, nodded reluctantly. The covenant still stands. It hasn't been invoked in 60 years, but it's valid. Unless, Silas said softly, the alpha in question is compromised, then the covenant doesn't apply. Compromised how? Margot demanded. By the bond, by the oath, like by the fact that he cannot put pack law above personal obsession. Silas turned to Thaddeus. Baron, I'm invoking the sigil oath. You will step aside and allow Miss Sinclair to be taken into council custody. Immediately. Thaddeus made a sound low in his throat, animal, anguished. Margot saw the exact moment the oath took hold. His face went white, his body locked rigid, and his eyes filled with gold as the wolf surged forward, fighting the compulsion with everything he had. Stop, Margot said, stepping toward Silas. You're hurting him. I'm enforcing pack law. Silas's voice was calm. Baron Carrington, comply. Thaddeus dropped to one knee, shaking violently. Blood trickled from his nose. Margot's heart shattered. Please, Miss Sinclair, come with us willingly, and I'll release the compulsion. She looked at Thaddeus, at the man who'd protected her, partnered with her, trusted her with his wolf, being torn apart by magic. And she made her choice. I'll come, she said. Let him go. Margot, Thaddeus forced the word out through clenched teeth. I won't watch you destroy yourself. She looked at Silas. I'll come with you, but I want his oath released. Now. Silas smiled. As you wish. He made a gesture, and Thaddeus gasped, collapsing forward onto his hands. The blood from his nose spattered on the flagstones. Gideon was at his side instantly. My lord, I'm fine, Thaddeus rasped. But he wasn't. Margot could see the tremors, the way the wolf was still too close to the surface. Miss Sinclair, Silas said. Come. She took one step toward him, and Thaddeus moved. He was on his feet before Margot could blink. Placing himself between her and Silas with such speed the air cracked. No. His voice was barely human. You're not taking her. Baron, Silas said warningly. I can invoke the oath again. Then do it. Break me with it. Tear me apart. I don't care. Thaddeus's eyes were fully gold now, his control shredding. You're not taking her. You'll force me to use lethal authority. You can't. Margot's voice rang out clear. Pack law forbids lethal force against an Alpha King without High Council approval. You don't have that authority, Elder Hawthorne. You're bluffing. Silas's face flushed with rage. You insolent. I'm a woman of Luna blood standing in an Alpha's territory under his recognized protection. Invoking ancestral rights you can't override without my consent. Margot stepped up beside Thaddeus. And I do not consent. The bond has compromised your judgment. No, the bond has clarified it. She met Silas's eyes. You came here to manufacture a crisis. You used Captain Morris to create false reports. You tried to seize me illegally. And when all that failed, you weaponized an oath sworn 15 years ago to torture a man into compliance. Every action you've taken today has been about control, not care. The council members were watching now with new eyes. Lady Pembroke had a slight smile. Dr. Merriweather was nodding. You've overreached, Elder, Margot said quietly. And now you have a choice. Leave peacefully and accept that you've lost this fight. Or push harder and face formal challenges from an Alpha King who has documented proof of your conspiracy. And a Luna blood who knows her rights well enough to tie you up in High Council hearings for years. Silas looked at her with pure hatred. Then he looked at Thaddeus, still trembling, still barely holding the wolf back, but standing firm. This isn't over, Silas said. Yes, Thaddeus said softly. It is. Silas turned on his heel. Council members, we're leaving. Captain Morris, you're under council arrest for falsifying reports. The rest of you, document everything. We'll be filing formal protests. They left in a storm of expensive wool and bitter silence. The door slammed shut, and the hall erupted in chaos. Pack members talking over each other, servants scurrying, Lady Pembroke calling for order. But Margot only saw Thaddeus. He was still shaking, still bleeding, still fighting to hold on to control by his fingernails. "See everyone out," Gideon ordered. "Now, give the Alpha space." The hall emptied quickly. Only Gideon, Dr. Merriweather, and Lady Pembroke remained. "He needs to shift," Dr. Merriweather said quietly. "The oath compulsion damaged something. He needs to let the wolf out to heal, or he'll tear himself apart from the inside." "Not here," Thaddeus gritted out. "Too many people. Too dangerous." "The grounds," Margot said. "Like last time." "You can't," he stopped, swaying. "Can't be near me right now. Wolf's too angry, too protective, too—" "Then I'll stay at a distance." She touched his arm, just briefly, just enough. "But I'm not leaving you alone with this." His eyes met hers, and something in them broke. "Go," he whispered. "Get to the grounds. I'll follow." She went. The grounds were cold under gray skies. And Margot stood near the tree line, Lady Pembroke beside her, wrapped in her wool cloak. Thaddeus emerged from the manor 5 minutes later, walking like every step hurt. Gideon flanked him, ready to intervene if necessary. "Far enough," Thaddeus called when he was 50 feet away. "Don't come closer." Margot stopped. He stripped off his coat, his waistcoat, his cravat. Each movement was shaky, uncoordinated. "What did the oath do to him?" Margot asked quietly. "Forced his wolf into submission through pain," Dr. Merriweather said, appearing at her elbow. "It's like, imagine someone reaching into your chest and squeezing your heart until you obey. The damage is psychological and magical. He'll heal, but it will take time." Thaddeus's shirt came off, and Margot saw them. Scars. Dozens of scars across his back, his shoulders, his ribs. Old, faded, but unmistakable. "The oath," she breathed. "He's defied it before," Dr. Merriweather confirmed, "and paid for it. Every time Silas invoked it over the years, it left marks." Margot felt rage and grief twist together in her chest. Thaddeus looked at her one more time. Then he shifted. The change was violent this time, faster, more desperate. The wolf clawing its way out like escaping a trap. Within seconds, the massive dark wolf stood where the man had been. But this wolf didn't run into the forest. This wolf paced, agitated, aggressive. Its gaze kept snapping back to Margot, protective, possessive. "He's unstable," Gideon said quietly. "The oath damaged his control. The wolf thinks you're in danger and wants you closer so it can guard you." "Then I'll go closer." "Margot, no," Lady Pembroke grabbed her arm. "If he's unstable—" "He won't hurt me," Margot pulled free gently. "I know he won't." She walked toward the wolf. It went absolutely still, watching her approach with those gold eyes. 20 feet, 10, 5. She stopped just out of reach. "I'm safe," she said quietly. "I'm here. I'm not leaving." The wolf made a low sound, not a growl, something softer, distressed. "I know it hurt. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," her voice cracked. "But you didn't have to break yourself to protect me. I would have survived council custody. I would have found a way back." The wolf's ears flattened. "I know you don't believe that, but it's true." She took one more step. "You've been carrying this oath alone for 15 years, letting it hurt you, letting Silas use it as a weapon. Why didn't you tell me?" The wolf lowered its head, and she understood. Shame. Fear that she'd see him as weak, controlled, caged. "You're not weak," Margot whispered. "You're the strongest person I've ever met. And I don't care about the oath. I don't care that you're bound. I care that you're hurt." She reached out slowly. The wolf watched her hand, tense, trembling. Her fingers touched its fur. And the wolf collapsed. Not injured, just surrendering. All that rigid control, all that desperate strength, finally giving out. It lay on the frozen ground, head on its paws, and shook. Margot knelt beside it, her hand still in its fur, and felt the bond between them throb with shared pain and fierce, impossible relief. "We won," she said softly. "We didn't win perfectly, but we won. Silas left. Morris is disgraced. And you're still here." The wolf's eyes closed. "And I'm still here," she added. "Because you taught me I was strong enough to fight for myself." The wolf's breathing steadied slowly. Margot stayed there, kneeling in the cold, until the tremors stopped and the wolf's heartbeat slowed to something almost calm. Then carefully, painfully, the wolf began to shift back. Bones cracking, fur receding, the massive form condensing down into a man curled on his side in the grass. Thaddeus gasped for air, shaking violently, and Margot pulled off her cloak, draping it over him without thinking. He caught her wrist, his grip weak but desperate. "You stayed," he rasped. "Of course I stayed. You could have left, gone with Silas, been free of all this. I don't want to be free of this." The words came out fierce, certain. "I want partnership. I want honesty. I want a man who trusts me enough to tell me about his cages so we can break them together." His eyes opened, human now, exhausted, but clear. "I should have told you about the oath." "Yes, you should have." She didn't look away. "But you told me everything else when it mattered, and you broke yourself trying to protect me. So we'll call it even and do better next time." Something like wonder crossed his face. Next time. There will be more fights. Silas won't stop. The council won't stop. My awakening isn't finished. She tightened her grip on his wrist. "So yes, next time. And the time after that. Until we win for good." Thaddeus pushed himself up slowly, the cloak falling away, and Margot was suddenly very aware that he was shirtless, scarred, and looking at her like she'd just rewritten every rule he knew. "Margot." "And another thing," she said, her voice shaking now. "Don't ever let someone hurt you like that again without telling me. We're partners. That means I get to help carry the weight, even when it's ugly." "You're remarkable," he said quietly. "I'm angry. You're both." And then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and fierce, and tasted like blood and relief, and something that might have been hope. His hand came up to cup her face, and she felt the tremor still running through him, felt the way he was holding back even now, afraid of taking too much, afraid of breaking this fragile thing between them. So she kissed him harder. Her hands found his shoulders, feeling the scars beneath her palms, the evidence of every time he'd defied that oath and paid for it. She wanted him to know she wasn't afraid of his damage, and wasn't afraid of his wolf or his bindings or the council that would keep coming for them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "This is a terrible idea," he said. "Probably. The bond will get stronger. The council will use it against us. Let them try. Margot, Thaddeus." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "I know what I'm choosing. I know it's dangerous and complicated and possibly going to end badly, but I'm choosing it anyway. I'm choosing you. Not because the bond made me, because you're worth choosing." His breath hitched. "Say something," she whispered. "I don't have the words." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I've spent 15 years being controlled, being bound, being told who I serve and what I owe and how far my leash extends. And you just stood in front of a council elder and told him you wouldn't be managed." He laughed, rough and wondering. "You terrify me." "Good. And He stopped. Tension visible in his shoulders, then forced it out. "I love you. I don't know if it's the bond or choice or both. But I love you, and that makes you the most dangerous thing in my world." Margot's heart stuttered. "Because if they take you," he continued, "they take everything, and I'll burn the council to ash getting you back." She should probably be alarmed by that. Instead, she felt something fierce and warm unfurl in her chest. "Then we make sure they can't take me." "How?" "We finish what we started. We expose every lie Silas has told. We use my Luna blood claim to force High Council review. Yet and we make ourselves too valuable and too visible to disappear quietly." She smiled. "And we do it as partners, not as alpha and awakening shifter, as equals." Thaddeus looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood, pulling her up with him, and drew her against his chest despite the cold and the scars and the watchers still at the tree line. "Equal partners," he said. "Even when I want to lock you away somewhere safe. Especially then." He kissed her again, softer this time, deliberate, a promise being made. When they finally pulled apart, Dr. Merriweather was approaching with Thaddeus's shirt and coat. "Apologies for the interruption," the doctor said dryly. "But you're both half frozen, and the Baron needs medical attention for the oath damage." Thaddeus pulled on his shirt, wincing. "Guess I'm fine." You're bleeding from your nose and you collapsed twice. You're not fine. Dr. Merriweather's tone brooked no argument. Inside. Now. Both of you. They walked back to the manor together. Thaddeus's hand found Margot's, and she didn't let go. At the door, he paused. What you did in there, invoking Lunablood rights, forcing Silas into a corner, that was brilliant. That was a desperate gamble based on a genealogy letter I barely understood. It worked. Barely. She looked up at him. And now Silas knows I have Lunablood. That makes me more valuable to him, not less. We bought time, but we didn't win. We won the day, Thaddeus said. That's enough for now. Inside, the household was buzzing. Pack members wanted to know what happened, whether the council was returning, whether Miss Sinclair was truly Lunablood. The Gideon handled them with quiet efficiency while Dr. Merriweather shepherded Margot and Thaddeus to the private study. Sit, the doctor ordered, pushing Thaddeus into a chair. And don't move while I examine the damage. Margot sank into the chair across from him, watching as Dr. Merriweather checked Thaddeus's eyes, his pulse, the blood vessels that had burst from the oath compulsion. You'll heal, the doctor said finally. But you need rest. No shifting for at least 2 days. The magical damage needs time to settle. Can't promise that. Then try. Dr. Merriweather packed his instruments away. Miss Sinclair, how are you feeling? Exhausted, angry, relieved. She paused. The moon sickness hasn't flared at all today, even during the confrontation. Because you're stabilizing faster than expected. The bond, the proximity, but your own strength, all of it is accelerating your adaptation. He smiled. You might complete your awakening within a fortnight instead of a month. And then you'll be fully wolf, and capable of shifting at will. He glanced between them. Which means you'll need to decide what you are to each other, publicly. The bond won't be private much longer. Thaddeus's hand tightened on the arm of his chair. Margot met his eyes. We already decided. We're partners. Partners, Dr. Merriweather repeated. Not mates? That too, probably, Margot said. But partners first. Everything else builds from there. The doctor's smile widened. Good. Then you might actually survive this. He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Thaddeus and Margot sat in silence, the fire crackling between them, and gas lamps casting warm pools of light as afternoon faded toward evening. What happens now? Margot asked finally. Now we prepare for the next fight. Silas will regroup. He'll come at us differently, through high council channels, through social pressure, through your family. Thaddeus leaned back, exhausted. But we have time. A few days, maybe a week. Then we use it. We finalize the coal contract renegotiation. We document everything from today's hearing. We prepare formal challenges. She paused. And we figure out how to break that oath. The sigil oath can't be broken, not without killing me. Then we find a way around it. A loophole. A counterbinding. Something. Margot stood, moving to the window. You've been carrying it for 15 years because you thought you had to carry it alone. But you don't anymore. Thaddeus was quiet for a long moment. Then, come here, she turned. He'd stood, was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Please, he added. Margot crossed to him. He pulled her close, carefully, like she might break, and just held her. Thank you, he said quietly. For staying, for fighting, for choosing this even when it would be easier not to. Margot wrapped her arms around him, feeling the scars beneath his shirt, the steady beat of his heart. I told you, she said. I'm not most people. No, you're not. They stood there as the gas lamps were lit throughout the house, and Margot thought about councils and oaths, and the fact that she'd just claimed Lunablood based on a genealogy record she'd requested weeks ago. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today, they'd survived. And that was enough. 3 days passed in careful preparation. Margot spent her mornings in the library, surrounded by leather-bound volumes of pack law and dusty genealogy records. The Thornfield lineage was real, documented across 3 centuries before going dormant in quiet human marriages. Her great-grandmother Helena had been the last confirmed Luna, and now that heritage had awakened in her blood. Understanding it felt like assembling a map of herself she'd never known existed. Her afternoons belonged to the infirmary crisis. The coal supplier's response arrived on the second day, delivered by Dr. Merriweather with a satisfied smile. The new contract locked rates at fair market value for 5 years. No phantom tariffs, no escalation clauses tied to imaginary rail costs. And the documentation she'd compiled had been devastating proof of fraud. And Thaddeus's quiet intervention with the rail companies had made resistance impossible. The infirmary survives, she told Lady Pembroke that evening, holding the signed contract in hands that no longer trembled. We'll have coal through next winter, and the winter after that. Your first victory as Luna, Lady Pembroke said. There will be many more. Margot looked at the contract, at the neat columns of numbers, the supplier's reluctant signature, the future secured through strategy and leverage rather than begging. Her victory, not perfectly independent perhaps, but earned through partnership. She filed it carefully among her household papers and felt something settle in her chest. The ordinary woman who'd managed an estate on impossible budgets was still here. I's just stronger now, but the peace was fragile. Gideon reported strangers watching the estate from the moorland edge. Council agents, almost certainly, documenting their movements. Servants brought whispers from the village. Elder Hawthorne had been seen in nearby towns, gathering witnesses, building his case. The High Council summons arrived on the 4th morning, its wax seal heavy with authority. 7 days. They had 7 days to prepare for judgment. And underneath it all, the moon sickness that had nearly killed her was simply gone. Margot woke each morning expecting fever, weakness, the pull of something trying to surface. Instead, she felt strong, clear, her senses sharper than they'd ever been. Dr. Merriweather confirmed what she already knew. Your awakening is complete, he said, examining her eyes, her pulse. It's like your body is ready to shift. It's only waiting for you to let go. That evening, Margot stood in the clearing where she'd watched Thaddeus shift twice before, wrapped in her warmest cloak against the winter cold. The moon was rising, not the wrong moon that had triggered her collapse weeks ago, but a clean silver crescent that felt almost welcoming. Thaddeus waited 20 feet away, already stripped to the waist despite the cold, his breath misting in the air. Scars from the sigil oath marked his shoulders and back, faded now, but still visible. Dr. Merriweather and Gideon waited at the tree line. Lady Pembroke had declared this entirely inappropriate for chaperoning, and returned to the manor, though Margot suspected the older woman simply wanted to give her privacy for something this intimate. How does this work? Margot asked, iron fastening her cloak and handing it to Hannah, who'd insisted on attending her even here. Beneath it she wore a simple dark wool dress, practical, with buttons down the front for easy removal. You stop fighting it, Thaddeus said, watching as she began unbuttoning the dress with Hannah's help. Victorian modesty had its limits in shifter territory. They'd explained she'd need to remove most of her clothing or ruin it in the transformation. The wolf has been pressing at your skin for weeks. You've been holding it back without realizing it. Now you just let go. Hannah helped her step out of the dress and petticoats, leaving her in her chemise and drawers, enough for modesty, thin enough not to tear. The cold bit at her exposed skin. Margot closed her eyes, reaching for the sensation she'd felt that night in the garden. The pull. At the heat. The feeling of something vast trying to surface. It was there, closer now, stronger, waiting. I feel it, she whispered. Good. Now stop holding it back. She tried. Felt the wolf press forward, and immediately her mind clamped down, terrified of losing control. I can't. Yes, you can. Thaddeus's voice was steady, patient. You faced down a council elder. You've touched my wolf when anyone else would have run. You've chosen this bond despite every reason not to. Surrendering to your own nature should be the easiest thing you've ever done. It's not the same. It's exactly the same. You're afraid of what you'll become, afraid you'll lose yourself. He waited until she opened her eyes. But Margot, you won't lose yourself. You'll just become more of what you already are. She looked at him, at the man who'd been terrified of his own wolf, his own bindings, and had learned to trust her with both. If he could do that, she could do this. Margot closed her eyes again, found the wolf waiting, and let go. The shift was nothing like Thaddeus's violent transformations. It was smooth, natural, like water finding its level. Her bones shifted with pressure, but not pain. Her senses exploded, every scent sharp and distinct, every sound layered and clear. Fur rippled across her skin in waves of silver gray. Moonlight made solid. Her hands became paws, claws digging into frozen earth. And then it was done. She stood on 4 legs, and the world was utterly transformed. Everything was sharper. The night wasn't dark, it was alive with shadow and silver. She could smell Thaddeus 20 feet away, a smoke and pine and something uniquely him that made her wolf rumble with recognition. Could hear Dr. Merriweather's heartbeat at the tree line, steady and calm. Could feel the bond between her and Thaddeus, like a golden thread pulling taut. Thaddeus shifted in response, smooth and controlled, the massive dark wolf appearing where the man had stood. He approached slowly, and Margot's wolf instincts cataloged everything. Size, power, dominance, alpha, but also mate, partner, safe. He lowered his head in greeting, and she mimicked the gesture without thinking. Then he turned and ran, and she followed. Running as a wolf was like nothing Margot had ever experienced. Pure speed, pure freedom. The forest blurred past, her paws finding purchase on frozen ground without conscious thought. Thaddeus ran ahead, and she followed his path, learning the rhythm of the hunt, even though they hunted nothing. They ran until the manor was distant behind them, until they reached the edge of Thaddeus's territory, where moorland stretched vast and empty under the stars. Then they stopped, and Thaddeus shifted back. Margot tried to follow, reached for her human form, and found it waiting. The shift back was just as smooth as the shift forward. Within seconds, she stood human again, breathing hard, her chemise and drawers somehow intact, her skin flushed with exertion and joy. She couldn't find words. I know. Thaddeus pulled on the shirt he'd carried, smiling. How do you feel? Powerful, clear, like I've been half asleep my entire life and just woke up. She laughed, breathless. Is it always like that? The first shift is always the strongest. But yes, it's always freedom. He handed her the cloak Hannah had brought. You're fully awakened now. The moon sickness is gone. You're wolf. Margot wrapped the cloak around herself, feeling the truth of it settle into her bones. She was wolf. She was Luna blood. She was no longer the perfectly ordinary woman who'd collapsed in a garden. She was something new. They walked back to the manor slowly, neither ready to return to the weight of preparation and strategy. The High Council hearing, Margot said finally. If I shift in front of them, they'll see you're in complete control. Not dangerous, not unstable. Exactly what we need them to see. Thaddeus stopped, turning to face her in the moonlight. But Margot, once you appear before the High Council as a shifted wolf, there's no going back. You'll be fully registered, fully part of this world. The human life you had before, it's gone. I know. Do you? His voice was gentle. Your family, your estate, your position in human society, all of it changes. You'll be wolf first, Luna blood second, human third. Some doors will close forever. Margot thought of the Sinclair estate, the drawing rooms, the charity work that had defined her life. Thought of her mother's expectations, the future she'd been raised for, and felt no regret. Those doors were cages, she said. Beautiful ones, but cages nonetheless. This? She gestured to the forest, the moon, the bond humming between them. This is the first real choice I've ever made. Thaddeus pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. Then we face the High Council together, as partners, as equals, as mates, if you'll have me, publicly. Permanently, Margot pulled back to look at him. Is that a proposal? It's a warning. His expression was serious. If we claim the mate bond publicly before the High Council, it becomes permanent, unbreakable. You'll be bound to me for life, and I to you. The Council will use it as ammunition. They'll say the bond corrupted your judgment, that you can't make rational choices, that I manipulated you into awakening. Let them say it. We'll prove them wrong. It won't be easy. Nothing about this has been easy, she smiled. But it's been worth it. He kissed her, soft and deliberate and full of promises neither of them could speak aloud yet. When they broke apart, his eyes were serious. There's something else you need to know about the hearing. What? Silas will invoke the oath again. He'll have to. It's his only leverage. And if he does it in front of the High Council, they'll see exactly what it does to me. He paused. But it will hurt. Badly. And I won't be able to hide it. Margot's chest tightened. Can we break it? Before the hearing? No, but he hesitated. There might be a way to counter it. I've been researching the old texts, the ones Dr. Merriweather keeps locked away, and I found something. What? Luna bond. If we complete the mate bond fully, not just emotionally but magically, it creates a counterbinding. He met her eyes. The oath was sworn before I met you, before the bond existed. The text suggests that a Luna bond, once formalized, asserts priority over previous bindings. It might be strong enough to shield me from the worst of the compulsion. Might? Pack law is old and contradictory. And no one's tested a Luna bond against a sigil oath in living memory. The theory exists in fragments, in texts written by Lunas centuries dead. He touched her face gently. It could work, or it could do nothing. But it's the only option we have besides endurance. Then we do it. Margot didn't hesitate. How? Tomorrow, in front of witnesses. We formalize the bond, declare our intent, and let the magic settle. His thumb traced her cheekbone. But Margot, once it's done, there's no undoing it. You'll be my Luna, my mate, bound to my territory and my fate. If the council destroys me, you fall too. Then we make sure they don't destroy you. You say that like it's simple. It is simple. She took his hand. We win. Together. The next morning, they formalized the bond. The ceremony was held in the great hall at dawn, and when the winter sun streamed through the tall windows and caught the dust motes like falling snow, Margot wore deep blue silk, the color of midnight, the color of promises, with jet beading at the bodice and cuffs. Lady Pembroke had helped her dress, pinning her hair up with silver combs that had belonged to Helena Thornfield. Thaddeus wore formal black tailcoat, gray waistcoat, white cravat tied with military precision. But his eyes were soft when he looked at her. Dr. Merriweather presided in his formal physician's robes, dark wool with silver trim denoting his status as pack healer. Gideon and Lady Pembroke stood as witnesses, along with a handful of senior pack members gathered to make it official under pack law. Candles burned on every surface despite the daylight. Tradition demanded fire and witness and intent. And the room smelled of beeswax and winter roses someone had brought from the conservatory. Margot's hands trembled slightly as she took her place across from Thaddeus, not from fear, from the enormity of what they were about to do. Dr. Merriweather opened an ancient book, its pages crackling with age. We gather to witness the claiming of mate bond between Alpha and Luna, he said, his voice carrying through the hall. This bond, once sealed, cannot be broken save by death. It is a promise of protection, partnership, and permanence. Do you both enter this freely? Yes, they said together. Then speak your claims. Thaddeus took Margot's hands, and the bond between them flared hot and bright, eager, recognizing what was about to happen. I claim you as my Luna, he said, his voice steady but rough with emotion. My mate, my equal. And before these witnesses and the moon itself, I bind my life to yours. Your battles are mine. Your victories are mine. Your fate is mine. This I swear. Margot's throat tightened. She'd practiced these words, but saying them now, seeing the absolute certainty in his eyes, made them feel new. I accept your claim, she said clearly. And I claim you in return. My alpha, my mate, my choice. Before these witnesses and the moon itself, I bind my life to yours. Your burdens are mine. Your scars are mine. Your future is mine. This I swear. The bond magic snapped into place like a lock clicking shut, but it didn't feel like imprisonment. It felt like coming home. The sensation was overwhelming. Margot gasped as the bond deepened, widened, became something vast and unbreakable. She could feel Thaddeus's heartbeat as if it were her own. I could sense his emotions like colors at the edge of her vision, relief, joy, fierce protectiveness, love. could feel the oath scars on his soul like phantom wounds she'd carried all along. And something new, a shield. Thin, fragile, but present. Luna magic wrapping around the places where the sigil oath had carved its marks, asserting itself as the primary binding. Thaddeus's eyes widened. I feel it. The shield. It's real. Dr. Merriweather smiled. The Luna bond recognizes no master but itself. Let us hope it's enough. The witnesses murmured approval. Lady Pembroke dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Gideon clasped Thaddeus's shoulder in silent congratulation. And Margot stood in her midnight blue silk, bound forever to a man who was both wolf and king, and felt no regret at all, only certainty. And they spent the next 5 days in relentless preparation. Gideon drilled them on High Council protocol, who could speak when, how to address the High Alpha, what challenges could be raised, and when. Lady Pembroke coached Margot on aristocratic bearing and formal address, transforming her charity-honed diplomacy into something that could stand before the oldest authority in pack law. Dr. Merriweather compiled medical documentation. Margot's complete awakening, the stabilization timeline, proof of rational cognition throughout. Evidence that the bond hadn't corrupted her judgment. It had simply accelerated a natural process. And Thaddeus prepared their legal arguments, pulling from pack law so ancient the books cracked when opened. He worked late into the nights, and Margot often found him in the library surrounded by parchment and candles, his expression grim. What are you looking for? She asked one evening. Precedent. Proof that what we're claiming, Luna bond priority, ancestral rights, bond partnership, has historical foundation. He rubbed his eyes. Silas will argue everything we've done violates tradition. I need to show him tradition is on our side. She sat beside him, reading over his shoulder, and together they built their case. Meanwhile, reports came from Gideon's scouts. Silas had been gathering witnesses, building his narrative. He'd brought in pack members who'd known Margot's family, who could testify to her sheltered human upbringing and lack of pack understanding. He'd hired a physician to argue that newly awakened shifters couldn't give genuine consent to mate bonds. He was preparing for war. On the 6th evening, Lady Pembroke insisted they rest. You'll do yourself no favors arriving exhausted and drawn, she said firmly. The High Council will judge your appearance as much as your arguments. Sleep. Both of you. Margot tried, but she lay awake in the darkness, feeling the bond hum between her and Thaddeus in his own chambers, and thought about what waited for them. Victory or separation. There was no middle ground. On the 7th day, they traveled to the High Council seat. The journey took most of the day by private carriage, the roads rutted and frozen beneath a gray winter sky. Inside, the carriage was lined with burgundy velvet, brass fittings polished to a shine, a small brazier providing warmth. Margot wore traveling clothes in deep green wool with a fur-lined cloak, and Thaddeus sat across from her in dark wool and leather, watching the countryside roll past. And they'd left before dawn, Lady Pembroke and Gideon accompanying them in a second carriage. Dr. Merriweather had gone ahead 2 days prior to file their documentation formally. For the first hour, they reviewed strategy, testing each other on protocol and responses. But as the miles stretched on, they fell into silence, the comfortable kind that came from the bond, from knowing each other's thoughts without words. Nervous? Thaddeus asked finally. Terrified, Margot admitted. You? The same. He leaned forward, taking her hand. But we've prepared as much as we can. The rest is performance. And luck. And the hope that the High Council values truth over politics. He smiled wryly, which is a gamble. The carriage hit a rut, jolting them, and Margot gripped his hand tighter. Through the bond, she felt his steady certainty beneath the fear, felt his absolute conviction that they would face this together, whatever came. When this is over, she said quietly, what happens to us? We go home. We rebuild the pack relationships Silas has poisoned. We learn how to be partners in peace, not just crisis. He paused. And we build something worth protecting. That sounds perfect. By late afternoon, they reached the High Council city, an old market town built around a Norman keep, now transformed into the seat of pack authority. The council chamber itself was ancient stone and stained glass, built in an era when pack law and human law were still separate but parallel. Margot glimpsed Silas arriving in a separate carriage, surrounded by his witnesses. He looked confident, prepared. She tightened her cloak around herself and walked into the chamber beside Thaddeus, their hands briefly touching for strength. Whatever happened next, they would face it as equals. The high council chamber was vast and cold, despite the fires burning in iron braziers. 20 council elders sat in a semicircle, robed in dark wool with silver wolf head pins at their collars. At the center, elevated on a stone dais, sat the High Alpha, an elderly woman with silver hair braided in an intricate crown and eyes like polished steel. Margot and Thaddeus stood in the center of the chamber, facing judgment. She wore the deep blue silk from the bonding ceremony beneath a black velvet cloak. Formal mourning colors transformed into power. Thaddeus stood beside her in full baronial regalia. Black tailcoat, gray brocade waistcoat, white cravat. Every inch the Alpha King. Behind them, witnesses filled the gallery. Gideon, Dr. Merriweather, Lady Pembroke. And Silas's supporters, pack members carefully chosen to paint Margot as an outsider, a human corrupted by forces she couldn't understand. The charges were read by a clerk in formal monotone. Bond corruption, defiance of council authority, unlawful invocation of dormant ancestral rights, and added since the original summons, unsanctioned mate bonding with an unregistered awakened. The High Alpha's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. Baron Carrington, you stand accused of allowing personal obsession to override pack law. How do you answer? Not guilty, High Alpha. Thaddeus's voice was steady, carrying through the stone hall. Every action I've taken has been in accordance with pack law and in protection of a woman who has been targeted, threatened, and nearly seized illegally by a council elder with a documented pattern of evidence fabrication. Silas stirred in his seat. High Alpha, if I may. You may not, Elder Hawthorne. You'll have your turn. The High Alpha turned her steel gaze to Margot. Miss Sinclair, you claim Luna blood and ancestral rights. Can you prove this claim? Margot stepped forward, producing the genealogy record with hands that didn't shake. I can, High Alpha. Helena Thornfield, my maternal great-grandmother, documented Luna of the Thornfield line. The lineage went dormant but never extinct. I carry that blood as evidenced by my awakening and the strength of the bond. The document was examined, verified, passed among the elders, and Margot watched their faces, some skeptical, some curious, some openly hostile. The High Alpha studied the parchment, then studied Margot with eyes that saw everything. And you invoked the covenant of ancestral rights to refuse council custody. Do you understand what that means? I do, High Alpha. It means I have the right to choose my own Alpha bond and cannot be forcibly removed from recognized protection without my explicit consent. And you give that consent now? To be bonded to Baron Carrington? I do, freely and willingly. The mate bond was formalized 6 days ago before witnesses, according to pack law and tradition. Silas stood abruptly, his expensive dark wool robe swirling. High Alpha, the bond has corrupted her judgment. She cannot give genuine consent while under its influence. I disagree, Margot said calmly, meeting his eyes without flinching. The bond creates pull, not compulsion. I chose Baron Carrington as my Alpha before the bond was formalized. I chose him when I had every opportunity to leave, and I choose him now, with full awareness of the consequences. You're newly awakened, inexperienced. You can't possibly understand. I understand that you attempted to seize me illegally in the middle of the night. I understand that you used fabricated evidence to justify territorial intervention. I understand that you weaponized a blood oath to torture a man into compliance. Margot's voice was steel wrapped in silk. And I understand that every argument you've made has been about control, not care, not protection. Control. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Several elders leaned forward, suddenly more interested. And the High Alpha raised her hand for silence. Elder Hawthorne, addressed the charge of evidence fabrication. Silas's expression tightened. Captain Morris acted without my knowledge. Captain Morris was your appointed liaison. His actions reflect on your authority. The High Alpha's eyes were merciless. And the Baron has provided documentation proving the reports were falsified. Unless you have counter-evidence. The reports were filed in good faith based on intelligence. False intelligence, which you either manufactured or failed to verify. Either is a breach of counsel responsibility. She leaned forward. But there's a more serious charge, Elder Hawthorne. You invoked a sigil oath, a binding that should only be used in cases of genuine threat to pack stability, to compel an Alpha King's compliance in a custody dispute. That is abuse of authority. I acted within my rights as senior council elder. Show us. The High Alpha's voice cut like a blade. Invoke the oath now. Let this council see exactly what you did. Silas went pale. High Alpha, I don't think. That wasn't a request, Elder. If you acted appropriately, you have nothing to hide. Invoke the sigil oath and order Baron Carrington to step forward 3 paces. Something harmless. Let us judge the severity of the binding. The trap was perfect. If Silas invoked the oath, the council would see the pain it caused, would see it was a weapon, not a tool of justice. If he refused, he'd admit the invocation was excessive. Margot felt Thaddeus tense beside her through the bond. She reached for his hand, hidden in the folds of her cloak, and squeezed once. We're ready, the touch said. And we tested the shield. Trust it. Silas's hands clenched at his sides. Then, with visible reluctance, I invoke the sigil oath. Baron Carrington, step forward 3 paces. Thaddeus's face went white. His body locked rigid. Margot felt the compulsion slam into him through the bond like a physical blow. But he didn't collapse. The Luna bond flared between them, golden and fierce, absorbing the worst of the magical assault. Thaddeus gritted his teeth, blood trickling from his nose, but he remained standing. The shield held, fragile, straining, but holding. And he took 3 measured steps forward, not because the oath compelled him, because he chose to, demonstrating control, not submission. When he stopped, the High Alpha's expression was carved from ice. Release him, Elder Hawthorne. Silas made the gesture with shaking hands, but Thaddeus gasped softly as the compulsion released. Margot felt the echo of pain through their bond, but also his fierce satisfaction. The shield had worked. The Luna bond had protected him. The High Alpha stood, her robes falling in severe lines. This council has seen enough. The sigil oath was clearly designed as a weapon of control, not a tool of justice. Elder Silas Hawthorne, you are hereby suspended from council authority, pending a full investigation into your conduct. Baron Carrington, you are cleared of all charges. Miss Sinclair, your Luna blood claim is recognized, your bond is legitimate, and you are formally registered as Luna of Carrington territory. She paused, her gaze sweeping both of them, and Margot saw something that might have been approval in those steel eyes. However, Baron Carrington, your sigil oath remains in effect. This council cannot dissolve a blood binding without your death or the death of those who witnessed its swearing. But we can impose limits. Effective immediately, the oath can only be invoked by unanimous High Council vote in cases of verified territorial threat. It will never again be used as a personal weapon. Thaddeus bowed deeply. Thank you, High Alpha. Don't thank me yet. You've made powerful enemies today, Baron. And you, Luna Sinclair. The title rang through the chamber, making it real. By claiming Luna status, you've accepted responsibility for territory, pack welfare, and council relations. You will mediate disputes, maintain alliances, and serve as voice for those without power. This is not a symbolic title. You will be held to Luna standards. And those standards are unforgiving. I understand, High Alpha, Margot said clearly, and I accept those responsibilities willingly. Good. The High Alpha's expression softened fractionally, just for a moment, just enough. Then go, build something worth protecting, and prove to this council that love and duty can coexist without corruption. They left the council chamber as partners, as mates, as equals. Outside, the winter sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that seemed impossible after the gray stone coldness of the chamber. Margot breathed in the frozen air and felt the weight of what they'd just survived settle into her bones. We won, she said quietly, watching her breath mist in the cold. We survived, Thaddeus corrected, are pulling her close despite the witnesses still filing out of the chamber behind them. Silas is suspended, not removed. The oath is limited, not broken. And we've just accepted responsibilities that will consume the rest of our lives. Good, she leaned into him, feeling his heartbeat steady through the bond. I was getting bored with having nothing to do. He laughed, surprised and genuine, the sound echoing off the ancient stones. Gideon approached with Lady Pembroke, both wearing matching expressions of fierce satisfaction. Dr. Merriweather followed, already making notes in a leather journal about the Luna Bond's effectiveness against oath magic. The carriages are ready, Gideon said. We can make it halfway home before dark if we leave now. Then let's go home, Margot said. Home. The word felt different now. Not the Sinclair estate with its drawing rooms and expectations. Not the human life she'd left behind. Home was Carrington territory. Home was the manor with its stone walls and hunting tapestries and library full of ancient pack law. Home was wherever she and Thaddeus built their future together. As they walked to the carriages, she caught sight of Silas standing alone near the council chamber steps, surrounded by his abandoned witnesses. He looked diminished, bitter, dangerous still, but defined for now. He met her eyes across the courtyard, and she saw the hatred there, cold and patient and not finished. But she also saw defeat. She'd beaten him, not through violence or power, but through law and strategy, and refusing to be intimidated. Because she'd stood in front of the highest authority in pack law and claimed her right to choose her own fate. And they'd listened. Margot turned away from Silas and climbed into the carriage beside Thaddeus. As they pulled away from the high council seat, leaving the ancient stones and bitter politics behind, she looked at the man she'd chosen, scarred, bound, complicated, hers, and felt the bond between them hum with certainty. So what now, she asked, settling into the velvet seat as the carriage wheels found their rhythm. Now we go home and send word to your family, Thaddeus said, counting on his fingers. We navigate your mother's inevitable horror that you've bonded to a wolf. We formalize your role as Luna with the pack. We rebuild the alliances Silas poisoned. And we figure out how to run a territory together without killing each other in the process. That sounds exhausting. It will be, he smiled. But we'll do it as partners. Not me protecting you, not you managing me. Equal strategy, equal risk, equal authority. You're going to hate parts of that, Margot said. The alpha in you is going to want to make decisions unilaterally. Probably. And the Luna in you is going to want to fix every problem yourself without asking for help. Definitely. Then we'll fight about it, and compromise, and build something better than what either of us could manage alone. He took her hand, threading their fingers together. That's what partnership means. Margot looked out the window at the countryside rolling past. Bare trees and frozen fields, and the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, the moon was rising. Her moon now, her world now. She'd started this journey as a perfectly ordinary woman collapsing in a garden, awakened by forces she didn't understand. She'd survived moon sickness, council politics, oath magic, and her own fear of what she might become. And she'd emerged as something new, not because fate demanded it, not because the bond compelled it, because she'd chosen it. Luna Margot Sinclair of Carrington Territory. Wolf, partner, equal. The woman who'd proven that love and power could coexist without corruption. The woman who'd looked at cages, beautiful, suffocating cages, and walked away towards something wild and uncertain and entirely her own. Thank you, she said quietly, squeezing Thaddeus's hand. For what? For seeing me, before I saw myself. He pulled her close, and then she rested her head on his shoulder as the carriage carried them home through the winter night. Behind them, the High Council and its politics faded into memory. Ahead, an uncertain future waited, full of challenges and responsibilities and inevitable conflicts. But they would face it together, and that, Margot thought as sleep finally claimed her, was more than enough. It was everything.